Hi everyone, welcome to week 4 of digital writing. This week we'll be talking about online identity, about how you write or compose yourself online in a sense, since the ways in which you interact with other people are mediated through texts of different kinds, images, videos, words, so on and so forth. We'll be using an excerpt from Dr. Sherry Turkle's book, Life on the Screen, Identity in the Age of the Internet. Dr. Turkle works at MIT, and she's both a sociologist and a clinical psychologist, meaning that she actually works with clients in addition to doing academic research. So Dr. Turkle's project is primarily one of figuring out people's relationships with computers, but we're reading her for the things that she has to say about online identity. In the rest of this video, I'll talk a little bit about the reading, and then I'll talk about how we construct identities both online and off, and how those things are similar and how they're different. So what should you know about Turkle before reading the excerpt? For one, it's a relatively short reading, but it's another one you should make sure to give plenty of time in order to really understand, because it's kind of dense. Hopefully some of the context that I'm giving you will help, but still, make some time to spend, a little extra time with it. First of all, Turkle's book was published in 1995, and the interfaces she describes on 90s era Macintoshes and Windows machines they just don't exist today in that same kind of way. Turkle talks about graphical user interfaces, or GUIs, as a new fancy thing, but they've been the norm for so long now that you may have never had to interact with a command line machine. I certainly never had to do so. So this is what my Office Mac screen looks like. And let's compare that to what the command line looks like. It's so different. People still do use command line as a way of interacting with their computers. Linux, another operating system like Windows or Apple's iOS, uses the command line. So programmers often like to work with Linux because it enables you to do things in a way that having to work through a GUI doesn't let you do. So a GUI in 1995, though still a GUI and not a command line interface, is still going to look really different from the iOS on my Mac, or certainly different from the iOS on my iPhone today. Another thing is, the things that she calls MUDs are more likely to be known nowadays as MMORPGs, or massively multiplayer online role-playing games. I think it's less likely today that you can play multiple MMOs on the same machine using what Turkle calls Windows, just because MMOs nowadays take a lot of internet bandwidth and a lot of processing power. But the concept of multitasking still certainly applies. As I write the script for this video, I often pause and open up Pokemon Go on my phone to spin the Starbucks Pokestop, because when I wrote the script, I was working at a Starbucks. Clearly, I'm in my office now, but that's what I was doing at the time. If I need to look up something online, the likelihood that I'll have only a single tab open in my internet browser is pretty slim. So multitasking is still a thing, whether or not MUDs, or MMOs are played at multiple ones at the same time. Another thing that you'll want to know is that Turkle uses two terms that you may or may not be familiar with, depending on what other classes you've had here at the U or here in the English department, to describe this multitasking kind of experience, what we might call a fractured or fluid experience of self. Turkle talks about modernist and postmodernist notions of the self, or of selfhood. The word modernist refers to a strain of philosophical and literary thought that conceives of selfhood, or a sense of self, as a singular entity, one that may grow and develop over time, but one that's essentially stable. Modernism means other things too, but that's the most important thing for our discussion this week. Postmodernism refers to the strain of thought that came after modernism, hence post. And it was basically a reaction to those ideas. Postmodernism says that, well, no, my sense of self is not singular. It's fractured and fluid. What do I mean by fluid? It's the idea that I simultaneously inhabit multiple selves, and that these selves can be very different, and aspects of these selves can even be in conflict with each other. And these selves, it's not just that they can change, it's that they do change depending on a number of things, and I can move fluidly among these selves. So the postmodernist idea of identity that Turkle is talking about in this book also contains the idea that I construct these selves differently in different spaces, both physical and digital, using language and other symbol systems. It might be useful to explain what I mean by constructing multiple selves by giving you an example of my own multiple digital identities. I'm going to talk about various on and offline identities I inhabit, but before I do, I want to preface this discussion with a little bit of transparency. I'm going to show you some of my social media settings, and I wanted to let you know that my social media privacy settings are set such that if you are so intrigued after you watch this video, you can probably Google me, and you might be able to find me on various social media sites. But the amount of content that you can access without actually connecting with me on that site will probably differ depending on the platform that you're looking at. So for example, my Twitter will be much more accessible to you than my Facebook probably. And while you can follow me on Twitter and you can send me your friend requests on Facebook if you so choose, it's my policy to not accept those friend requests or follow anyone back until after a semester's grades are in. Just, wanted to let you guys know this in advance so that if you are so inclined and you send me a friend request and then, like it's February and you start to think that maybe I secretly hate you, don't think that. It's just my policy to wait until after the grades are in for that semester. Okay, so me online. Let's start with my introduction on our e-learning website. I give you a professional headshot and a brief description of my professional work and some personal hobbies. I'm presenting both a professional and a personal self, and I do so because research has shown that it can be really difficult to connect with students in an online course, and I've long thought from both personal experience and from research in pedagogy that it's important to connect with students in a class. And I've also felt that one of my strengths as a teacher is connecting with students, understanding what their difficulties in a class are, helping them to work through those difficulties, and part of that comes from my ability to connect with a student. So I make a larger effort to personalize myself in this class a bit more, if you will, in an effort to kind of make that connection. So even though that identity is fractured, it's even less fractured than other online identities I inhabit. So let's take a look at Facebook, for example. Facebook lets you create a digital identity through various parts of your Facebook page. You get an avatar, you get a cover photo, you get this little intro box thingy that lets you write something about yourself and list several of your previous jobs and education. The fact that Facebook's introduction to your online presence focuses so heavily on jobs and education says a lot about how bound up identity is with professionalism and education in the US. I don't know what Facebook looks like in other countries. The France Facebook, for example, that interface might look different, but I'm not sure. Anyway, so Facebook also lets you share places you've lived, contact, and basic info like your birthday, your sexuality, your age, suggesting that age and sexuality are also highly significant aspects of identity, since Facebook calls that basic info. It lists relationships and family you've connected with on Facebook, and it lets you share some other details about yourself without giving them a category to belong to. It also gives like a timeline of life events, so you're given all these details about me on my page, and I can curate that by selecting different photos and phrases and words and different things to represent myself. So that's one part of my Facebook identity. And there's also the identity that I cultivate by interacting with other people on Facebook, by posting things, sharing videos, commenting on things other people have posted. So I cultivate that identity through the content that I share and that I react to. Facebook also lets me choose specific audiences to share that content with. I can make my posts public, share with only friends, or even create specific groups of friends in the special custom categories that I can share. Like I only want my roller derby friends in Minneapolis to see this post, or I only want family to see this post, whatever. So Facebook enables me to share content to one group of friends that I might not want another group of friends seeing. Just as an example, most of my family and I share very different political beliefs, so I might create a custom group to share that particular content with in case I don't want to get into a Facebook fight with certain members of my family. On the other hand, some members of my family just choose to curate their Facebook in such a way as to keep political posts from even appearing in their feed. So even if I do choose to share a political post with all of my friends and not just a custom group, a particular family member might not see that because they've chosen to hide that content on Facebook. So The only aspects of my identity that they might see are my posts about playing Pokemon Go, going to see Moana in theaters, or reactions to the latest Steven Universe episode. In this way, I don't even have total control over my digital identity on sites like these because of the way the site enables specific users to curate their own experiences and their own perceptions of other people and other users. But that's only online, you might say. You're still the same person online and off, no matter who sees what you share or how you represent yourself. Well, I mean, that assumes that we don't use representations and symbol systems like language to represent ourselves IRL in real life too, which we do. Dress is the easiest example of this. How we dress is a way of representing our identities to others. What I wear when I create videos for this class is different from what I wear when I spend a lazy Saturday at home, or when I go to the store, or when I go to science fiction and fantasy conventions. These are all versions of myself that I inhabit at different times. These different types of dress are texts that can be read by those around me to help them read my identity. But Dr. Clayson, you might say, you still have the same physical body in all of those places, don't you? And I would say, well, sort of. Even my physical body changes from day to day, hour to hour, minute to minute. Cells die and new ones are born. New neural pathways in my brain are forged as I learn new concepts. Even my body is changing all the time. Postmodernism allows us to see that our senses of selves are kind of like the stories we tell ourselves and others about who we are, and that it's okay to inhabit multiple selves, even at the same time. A postmodernist view of identity also recognizes the large extent to which symbol systems like language make up who we are. Does my identity exist, or do my identities exist if I don't have the language to describe them? That's a question for a totally different class, but one that you can think about if you'd like to. To bring it all back around to Turkle, as you read the article, think about the different online personas that you create every time you're in an online space. How do you represent yourself when you're online in this class, for example? When you're on social media, when you email me or other professors, and so on and so forth. Think that through, and I'll see you in the discussion posts.